So you've decided from now on, you're only going to read queer books. You grew up oversaturated by straight media, and you've said, I've had enough. No more. As long as I have the choice, why would I choose to read about more straight people? How boring. And for the most part, I would support this decision. I suppose it depends on the extremity of the decision, whether or not you've decided that should this hand ever lay again on another book where a man yearns after a woman, let this hand burn. That might be too extreme for me. Obviously, I'm not trying to even pretend to tell you what you should or shouldn't read. Your literary selections are your God-given right, and thank goodness. No one can rob you of your desires. I'm not trying to rob you. I'm trying to help you. See, if you only read queer books, you probably wouldn't read The Lord of the Rings. Depends on who you ask. Okay, but in all seriousness, let's actually talk about this. As a lesbian, and especially as a late-blooming lesbian, I know that there was no reading experience like my first woman-loving woman novel. The Price of Salt by Patricia Highsmith, otherwise known as Carol, was my first lesbian novel. And the nights that I spent staying up late on a mattress in my mom's attic, those nights were nothing short of life-changing. I felt myself evolving. I felt my eyes opening. So I understand how important and life-changing it can be to see you and your feelings represented on the page. For someone who is so uncertain of who they are and their place in the world, reading a book like that is so important. And it's so important to continue to read and support those books and those authors in that space. But I'm here today, I'm making this video because I've seen one too many TikToks, one too many comments from queer readers, more or less vowing to never read straight media again. And at first I got it, I was there with you, but the more that I kept seeing it, the more that it started to kind of bother me. I am a chronic people pleaser. The idea of even rousing conflict or ruffling feathers, but this is important to me. But hey, if you want support knocking straight tropes, straight series, the sheer mass quantity of straight books, I will support you. I'll back you up 100%. But seeming to immediately disapprove or push away anything written that doesn't have a queer character or queer themes in it starts to feel a little problematic, and I don't think I'd be the only one to say so. The easy argument to make, and probably the obvious argument, is, if queer people start to say that they're done reading straight books, that's the same as straight people saying they don't want to read queer books. That's the easy argument, but it's not the argument I'm trying to make. It's not the argument I agree with. Because straight people didn't grow up oversaturated with queer media. They were never the minority. So for a queer person to come along and say, I'm gonna cut out extra straight media where I can, that makes a lot more sense. And I'm on board with that, if that's what you need to do. On the other hand, I would understand someone making the argument that when a community makes a boundary like that, what's to keep another community from making their own boundary? And then what's to keep that boundary from extending past just sexual orientation? A boundary like that starts to feel divisive. Yep, and at this point you're saying, Anna, this is too extreme, this was never that serious, and you're probably right. I digress, because I'm not here to make that argument. What I want to say is this. On my bookshelf, there's a little space that I save for my personal favorites. These are books that changed my life. They were windows as much as they were mirrors. I saw myself in them to an embarrassing degree. I love these books. And it would be so nice if all of those books were queer. But the reality is that they're not. In fact, most of them aren't. And this boils down to the very simple fact that not all good books are queer. And vice versa, not all queer books are good. Let's start at the bookstore. The classics take up so many rows of shelves. You recognize so many of the titles. You recognize that they're full of straight people, straight stories, straight romances, the straight agenda. And maybe you've read the classics. Maybe you're done with them. Maybe you've read the Jane Austen straight romance. You've read one too many books where the main character is a man having the same old emotions for the same old type of woman. You've been there, you've done it, you can move on. In fact, I can only name a handful of queer classics, and even then they feel like classics only in the queer community and less so to the whole of a generation. If you ask your average aged reader, they'll talk all about Pride and Prejudice, The Great Gatsby, 1984, Frankenstein, Picture of Dorian Gray, etc. But then if you ask them about The Well of Loneliness, they'll have no idea what you're talking about, even though that book sat on the shelves of so many lesbians in the 20th century. It's disheartening. No, it's heartbreaking. It's frustrating. History ignored us. I'm there with you. I get that. Luckily, we have what will be future classics. We have The Song of Achilles, Martyr, The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, Call Me By Your Name, hopefully This Is How You Lose the Time War. Why are all of these titles so long? But there are so many others that deserve that title as well, and that status. Nonetheless, it's disheartening when all of the queer books right now are put on a shelf in the back of the store. Granted, the market is flourishing right now. You can find LGBTQ+ stories in all types of genres. Horror, sci-fi, romance, science fiction, literary fiction, memoir, literally anything, it's all there. So read away. I will be reading too. But then the obvious question emerges, why stop there? And then questions after that include, what about non-romance books? What about books that include characters that aren't necessarily out? Like many of the men that Patricia Highsmith wrote, Tom Ripley in The Talented Mr. Ripley is a notoriously queer-coded character, even though it's never explicitly stated. And then I'm curious how you feel about reading a straight book when you know that the author is queer. Does that change anything? Well, then you'll ask, why is a queer author writing straight characters? Because writing is as much about exploring as reading is, or maybe is supposed to be. I've already mentioned Patricia Highsmith. She was a raging lesbian and wrote so many main male characters. What about the popular book, I Who Have Never Known Men? This book deeply impacted me, and it is very queer-coded at times and very feminist, even though it's not labeled that way. So at that point, you're fighting the labels. What if this book had changed you as much as it changed me, and you never found it because it's not listed on the internet as queer literature? It's not prominent on the queer side of TikTok. Most of these questions are rhetorical. Really what I'm getting at is, at what point do you start to question what you're not reading? When do you question if you're missing out on a life-changing read? I recognize that there are readers out there who only read to be comforted. They don't need to explore the world. They don't need to expand their horizons. They've done that. They're not bigots. They read because that's where they feel safe. They see themselves on the page and they need that. So the majority of what they want to be reading is where they find that security. And that makes sense to me. I get that. And please don't stop doing what gives you comfort. But surely not all things that bring you comfort in your life are queer. I feel like most of us have straight friends or straight families or even that straight kids movie you grew up with that still brings you that same comfort. It's starting to sound like I'm a champion for straight people. Okay, let's say you decide to only read mostly queer books. And then let's say you decide that you're going to read mostly queer books until you hear about a really good not queer book. Well, who are you going to rely on to tell you when it's time to read outside of your desired material? I don't know about you, but very rarely are my favorites ever my friends' favorites. And very rarely are they ever the internet's favorites. You just might have to venture out and read any and everything until you find a book that impacts you like that. Because as readers, we all deserve to have that experience where a book infects our brains and makes its way to the bookshelf next to your other favorites. What makes your book your favorite, I hope, is not just the fact that it had a woman kissing another woman in it. I would hope that we would all be just a little bit deeper than that. But if what it takes to make it to your personal favorite spot on the shelf is solely representation, then you're set. You're set for life, and honestly, I'm jealous. Because more often than not, what it takes for a book to even make it as a favorite contender is what the reader finds and connects to underneath everything. Underneath gender, underneath sexual orientation. It would be heavenly if we could have the best of both worlds. If you found something that you profoundly and deeply connected to, and it had a woman kissing another woman in it. Fuck yeah, that'd be amazing. But that's not the world that we live in. And that's really sad, but it's true. I randomly bought this book from the last bookstore in LA. Not because I knew what it was, but because I wanted to buy something. And this book spoke to me from a shelf, so I bought it. This book is tied for my all-time favorite. I have never had a piece of literature reflect me back to me so painfully clearly. I saw myself and a lot of my flaws in this book. It was embarrassing. And yet I would almost guarantee you've never heard of this book. This book has a 3.1 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, which means the internet doesn't care about this book. You'll never guess what it's about. This is about a straight man who likes to pretend that he is Steve Martin so that he can get by in social situations and flirt with the girl that he likes. I mean, come on, that's laughable. It's awful. And yet, I bawled my eyes out in LAX because I'd never had a reading experience like this. At face value, reading the back of this book, I never should have picked it up. I never should have expected that it would rock my world and send me into an existential crisis, which I was later very grateful for. But it did. And I would hate for a reader to forget that that's the magic of literature. That's the magic of reading. What is surface level, like gender and sexual orientation, is never going to equal what's underneath it. I can cry over a woman breaking up with another woman because that's what my past relationships have looked like. I see myself there, and that's amazing. But I can also cry over a woman breaking up with a man because he wasn't what she thought she needed, because that's also what my past relationships have looked like. I can see myself there, too. It's a different type of seeing, but it's important nonetheless. I remember a conversation I had about This Is How You Lose the Time War, which is my other all-time favorite book. I was talking to a male straight friend about it for context, trying to explain to him why I loved it. And I was shocked to find that not only had he read it, but he immediately matched my enthusiasm and shared my love for this extremely sapphic sci-fi romance. It was at this point that another friend jumped in and just blurted out, "Why did you read that? I thought you were straight." To which this guy replied, "Well, yeah, I'm straight, but it's a fucking good book. I'm a romantic, and this was one of the most romantic books I've ever read, and I loved it for that." I sat there. I agreed with him wholeheartedly, and actually found myself so pleased that he had read it and I didn't have to just explain to him what I loved about it. He already knew, he got it. And I loved that connection we shared over it, not as a lesbian and a straight guy, but as romantics. So continue to read what you're interested in, what you want to read, what comforts you. But I implore you not to shut yourself off from other opportunities. I think it is a grave oversight to turn away from a book just because you don't immediately see yourself in it. And I would say this to more than just the queer community. I would hope that all readers would give what's underneath the main character a chance. I think that was always the point of storytelling, to connect on a deeper level.